Hey, I'm Joe Jansen. I want to welcome you back to session 2 of Life Planning. Last week we talked about developing a mission statement, a written paragraph of your purpose, what you're passionate about, what you feel like God called you and put you on the planet for. We talked about the roles that we play in life, that the roles come out of that mission, and we talked about developing those roles, and we asking the question in each one of those roles, what's the most important thing I can do this week in each one of those roles to make the maximum impact in our life. And this week, I want to talk a little bit to you about finding the priorities of life. Like what's a priority? How do we figure out what's the most important things in each one of those roles? And then how do we manage time, and how do we get the most important thing onto our calendars, into our life, so that we're actually doing from day to day, week to week. How are we doing the important things, so that you want to be able to go to sleep at night. Your head hits that pillow, knowing that I did what was important today. I did the most significant things that I could do today, and you can go to sleep with peace, knowing that you did those things. Covey gives us a great tool for what, and he actually calls it the time management matrix for determining what's truly important. It helps you to determine what's really important. Am I doing the important things in life, or am I always at the mercy of what's urgent and just in crisis mode? And Covey gives us the time management matrix. I don't think this is something that Covey necessarily came up with, but I know it's popular among his material. When you look at the matrix, it's got the four quadrants. And again, it helps us. This is going to help us to live an effective life, to live a life that's significant to us, because it's keeping us on track of our mission. And it's helping us to live what's most important in each of the roles of our life. That it keeps me on track to look at, am I being the best father that I can be to my children? There were times when I would put my children on my calendar, that I'm gonna spend time with them, because I would be looking at my roles and realizing that maybe I've been busy at work, doing some things, and haven't really connected with them, and so I would make some time, or I would see one of my kids struggling in an area or giving some problems in the area. So during the role time, when I'm looking at what's the most important thing I could do this week to have the greatest impact, I knew the important thing to do was to spend time with one of my sons or with my daughter, some quality time communicating with them. And so again, this matrix helps us to see some of the principles of finding the important things. And it's broken down into 4 quadrants, and you can see that. And quadrant 1 is the quadrant of production, but it's important and urgent. In other words, and something's important and urgent, it's kind of crisis mode. It's where deadlines are met in quadrant 1. If you're always living life, up against a deadline, you're living in quadrant 1. If you find yourself in crisis mode most of the time, most of the week you're in crisis mode, you're living in quadrant 1. Now, quadrant 1 is not it's not a bad thing, because things get done in quadrant 1. In fact, you can have a job. Like if you're an emergency room nurse or an emergency room doctor, your job is constant crisis mode, and some people love that. They love the adrenaline, they love the work of it. But we have to be careful living in that mode all the time, living off adrenaline, because we'll see that we're going to burn out if we're always in that crisis mode. Pressing problems, and deadlines and things like that. So that's quadrant 1 is the important, urgent. Quadrant 2 is the quadrant of quality, and it's the urgent. It's the important but not urgent. And so this is the quadrant of quality, in that these are important things, but they're not urgent. Now here's the problem, though. Oftentimes, because it's not urgent, these things don't get done, and we wind up in quadrant 1 in the crisis mode. And some of the things that are happening in quadrant 2 is planning, preparation, building relationships, seizing new opportunities, prevention, things that have to do with prevention, building yourself, personal growth. Those are all the things in that quadrant of quality, because you're spending time on the front end of things to do the preparation work. You're seizing opportunities to learn and to grow. And sometimes people don't spend time in quadrant 2 because it can seem like nothing's getting done. But this is the place where the preparation to be able to get things done happens. When you're spending time building relationships, so again, sometimes people feel like, well, what's that doing? Well, those are the important things. If you're not spending time weekly building relationships, those relationships won't get built, and then again, you're going to wind up in crisis mode in the relationships in your life, and you'll be in quadrant 1 all the time. Quadrant 2 is the place you want to spend a lot of your time. I want my goals to come out of quadrant 2 because that's where the quality is going to happen. In quadrant 3, it's the quadrant of deception, and that's where it's not important, but it's urgent. And not important, but it's urgent is oftentimes somebody else's problems are coming to you. They're coming to you. Can you do this? Can you do that? Somebody else is asking for your time, your energy, your talents. It's interruptions. It's some phone calls. It's some emails that, again, other people kind of infringing on you with urgency. And again, so if you're not in quadrant 2, formulating your goals, your next steps, your action steps on what you want to do, building what's important to you to accomplish your mission statement, your purpose, and what God has called you to. If you have nothing happening there and other people come to you, it's hard to say no to them because you don't really have anything else firmly set. And so again, then you're helping somebody else accomplish their goals, but yours are just being kind of left on the sideline. And again, that's why it's important to be in quadrant 2. And then there's quadrant 4, which is the not important, not urgent. And this is kind of the quadrant of waste. It's where you're so oftentimes burnout, you end up in this quadrant 4. You spend so much time in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 3 that you're just burned out. You're just so frustrated that you're just going on social media all the time, or you're just binge watching television, or you're just excessive on just busy work, escape activities. This is not saying that you can never have vacation, never have time off, but this is just totally wasted time. And oftentimes, again, if you're always in crisis mode, if you haven't been preparing and planning and building the skills and the giftings that you have, and you end up in that crisis mode, and then you're going to end up in quadrant 4, the quadrant of waste. What we want to do is be able to spend time in quadrant 2. Some of the quadrant 2 activities are improving communication with other people around you, better preparation, better planning and organizing, taking better care of self, seizing new opportunities, and personal development. Remember when we talked about sharpening the saw? So when I write my roles down and I'm looking at sharpening the saw, I'm asking myself, what new opportunities are around me? What would I even be looking for to come up? I'm also looking for other personal developments. I'm a lifelong learner. I want to stay curious. I want to always be learning about things, and so quadrant 2 helps me to stay there. And then when I'm reviewing my week, when I'm even reviewing my day, I will sometimes go through what have I done, and I'll look at what quadrant were those things in. And I'm hoping at the end of the week that there's a majority of quadrant 2 activities that are on my calendar than there are any other quadrants for that week, because that's going to keep me healthy. So the question that I'm asking is, what is the one thing that I can do this week for the greatest impact? And again, looking at quadrant 2 is going to help me come up with the answer to that question. We're working all of this material again. So when I'm looking at the quadrants, I'm finding what's really important, not urgent, and then I want to formulate goals, activities that I'm literally going to put on my calendar. And I'm going to do this. We want to work in the framework of a week. Sometimes people do daily planning, or they'll do yearly planning. But doing your planning in a week is just a great time frame. It's a natural time frame because we work from week to week. It's not too long for planning. And again, if you only plan for one day, it's hard to get context on what happened before that, what happens after that. And so when I look at my week, I take Sunday night and I'm looking over my week. Sometimes I do it even on Friday afternoon. I look at what I've done, and then I look at what's going to be happening. And if I find myself, overloaded, I can make some adjustments. But if I'm only looking at one day at a time, it's hard to know. I may be overloaded one day. So like today, if I'm working on teaching and filming courses, that's going to be a busy day. So I'm probably going to try to have some days afterwards where it's not quite as intense. So that I can rest and I'm not burning out. So that week, that the context of a week really works well if you try that out. And so the matrix helps us know where are we? What are we really working on? What's important? Or are we just in crisis? Are we having somebody else controlling our lives? Or are we burned out? Or just kind of spending our time binge watching some Netflix thing all the time? Or are we doing what's important? And then I want to figure out, how do I get these on my calendar so that they're going to get done? Because again, we live in such a crazy busy culture that it's easy, even if I kind of know what's important, getting it onto the calendar is sometimes difficult to do. And so I want to tell you this story that Covey had in his book that really helps me, and I know it's helped a lot of other people that I've shared this with, get a real picture of how to get the important things on your calendar. And the story goes like this: there was a professor teaching on time management. I think it was a seminar, and he came in at one point with a cart, and it had this big gallon jug. And around the cart there was some rocks and things like that, and he asked the students, the participants, how many rocks can I get in this jug? And they threw out some numbers, and then he took the rocks and he put them in the jug right up to the top, and then he asked them, hey, is this jug full? And all the students were like, well, yes, it's full. And he said, no, it's not. And he took out another bucket from underneath the cart, and he began to pour pebbles into this bucket and into the jug, and he was shaking it so that the gravel pebbles were filling in the spaces, and he got that to the top. And then he asked the participants again, is the jug full? And then a few of them still said yes, and he said, no, it's not. And then he pulled out a jug of sand, and he started pouring the sand into this glass jug, and again shaking it a little bit so all the fine particles were getting in there. And once again, he said to the participants, "Hey, is this jar full?" And they knew by this time. Well, this is just a trick question. So everybody was quiet, and he said, "Well, it's not." And he pulled out a pitcher of water, and he started pouring that pitcher of water in, and again the water filled in, and then it was full. And he asked, "What's the lesson to be learned here?" And one of the students said, "If you work carefully, you can get a whole lot more in than you would think." And he said, "No, that's not the answer. That's not the lesson. The lesson is that if you want to get the big rocks in, you need to put them in first." And the lesson for us is, if we want to get the most important things in our life in, if we want to get the big rocks of life in, if you want to have a good relationship with your friends, if you want to have a good relationship with your spouse, or a good relationship with your sons or your daughters, you need to spend time with them. And that big rock is going to have to be on your calendar. Having a calendar, if you don't have a calendar, you should have one calendar that you're able to track all the most important things that you need to do. And so when I do a weekly planning time, and you really need to have a weekly planning time, that you're looking at your roles, and you're thinking about the quadrant 2 activities that you want to do. You're thinking about what's the one thing that I can do that'll have the greatest impact in each one of these roles. And then I begin to take those one things and place them in the calendar. When am I going to do them? See, that's what a goal is all about, is having something that's measurable and something that's time sensitive. Because once it's on my calendar, I know it's going to get done. And I know that I can track it. I can track it when it's on my calendar, because I'm going to do a review. I'm going to do a daily review, and I'm going to do a weekly review to see was I able to get things done. And I'm looking at I'm placing the big rocks on the calendar, and it's the rocks that are quadrant 2 activities. It's the most important activities they're coming out of your mission, and they're coming out of your roles. Again, hey, here's the thing: I make an appointment with myself, one, to do my planning, but I'm also making appointments with myself to sharpen my saw. I want to be able to have time to develop my gifts, to learn more about how to use the talents and gifts that I have. And you need to do the same thing, to make appointment with yourself, to plan your week, review your week, and also to work on yourself, and to be able to track those things and review those things. So I want to talk to you about the weekly review. I do this a daily review. I do what I call a 25-20. I take 20 minutes in the morning to plan my day, and oftentimes my day is if I'm doing my planning, my weekly planning, I already have things on the calendar. But I like to before the day begins, sometimes even the night before, but 20 minutes before the day begins, I look at my day, what's going to be happening. I get my mind ready for the day. I can make some adjustments if I need to, because things have changed. These things aren't written in stone. I take 20 minutes of that. And then sometime in midday, sometime during the day, I take 5. It's a 25. I take 5 just to check in with myself, check in with my to-do list, check in with my calendar to see, am I on track? Am I doing the things that are important? Am I doing the things that God has called me to? Am I being true to myself? Am I having integrity in the moments during the day to stay on track, to stay true to the mission? And it's really helpful to do that sometime during the day, because again, crisis can happen, storms can happen, or I can just be having a bad day. And that 5 minutes somewhere in midday helps me to get back on track again. And then the 25-20 at the end of the day, I'm packing things up, I'm closing things out. I'm just kind of bringing some closure to the end of my workday, and I'm looking at some things that I've learned. Some of the questions that I would ask in a weekly review or a daily review, I look at what did I accomplish. I look at what did I learn. If there's some lessons that I learned, I'm looking for some aha moments, but then I'm going to write them down, because I learned a long time ago that I'm having aha moments, but then I'm forgetting them. And so I actually write lessons down so that I can go back to them and make sure they become a part of who I am. And so if you look for those moments, what did I learn today? What was significant that I want to record? And then I look at what needs to be adjusted. There may be some things during the day that, well, I don't want to do that again, or let's do more of that. Again, having that review time helps me to remember that I want to make adjustments or add to something. And then I ask the question, did I keep my priorities? These weekly and daily reviews are really, to me, some of the most important stuff of a life plan, because you can get it all on paper or on your computer, a computer program that you have. But if you're not using it, if you're not looking at that mission statement on a weekly basis and looking at your roles on a daily and weekly basis and putting things on your calendar, well, then it's not helping you. It's you're gonna be in the same rut. You're gonna be kind of on that treadmill, just doing things, and just being tired, but not knowing whether there's any progress, any production, any fruit. And again, that's why the sharpen the saw is so important, because you need to take care of yourself to have the best outcomes. And having these reviews, the 25-20 and a weekly planning time is so important to be able to work out what's the significant things that are getting done in your life from day to day and week to week. So again, we've covered a lot of material here. Just in way of review, we touched on the time management matrix, and I hope that makes sense to you and that you can look at it to be able to stay in quadrant 2. Doesn't mean you're never going to be in quadrant 1. Like I said, sometimes in family situations, I know with my children that if you have children with an illness, you have crisis. It doesn't mean that quadrant 1 is not a bad thing. It's just that quadrant 2, no matter where you are, no matter what you do, quadrant 2 is that quadrant of quality where you're being a learner. Preparation and planning is so important in any job you find yourself in any relationship, in your roles, in each one of your roles. Preparation, planning, seizing new opportunities, and those things can only be done with evaluation and review. And then we talked about how do we really get the important things onto our calendar so that they're getting done in life, that we're accomplishing what's important. We're not just finding out, but we're actually doing them. We talked about the big rocks. And the challenge I have for you is, discover those big rocks, but they get them onto a calendar. Everybody needs a calendar. Some people work best with a paper calendar, actually continuing with that. Others, they use some online calendars, but the important thing is to have one, just one, because if you have more than one, it can get very confusing. But get your big rocks on the calendar, and then do that 25-20 every day. Take the time to evaluate and do a weekly planning time. A Sunday night, or pick a night that you can plan for a week, plan the week, so you're looking at it, and again, you're prepared with your big rocks in.